Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Now, let me cover another interesting area that really impacts everyone directly. And let's talk about jobs and wages. Now, in general, in Europe, and of course I don't have knowledge of everything, but from what I can tell, of course, most countries in the EU are in horrible, horrible trouble. They're in terrible debt, and of course, the COVID 19 has kind of been the coup de grace, killing whatever little business is left. But you got to remember there is a unique relationship in Europe to the UK and, of course, Germany, who is occupied by 150,000 American soldiers and another 150 or 200,000 relatives, etc., that come here and live here. Or should we say, pay the right to protect the Nazis? So the whole idea is that we need to understand this reality of what's going on. But let's talk about wages in general. Now, people, and I was under the assumption before I came here that Germany was a technological, sophisticated country. No, it's a blue-collar country with a bunch of low-level slobs who really are very crude, burping, farting, uneducated lowlife who can't really fill most of the technical jobs. And of course, like most people or most countries, they have a tech industry of a certain percentage where they do high-tech stuff, usually that has been gotten from other people's sciences and that they have pretty much stolen and applied to themselves, claiming that they invented it, when of course they haven't. We'll talk about a few issues, and one of the issues is the fact is that Germany has some of the lowest rates. I think it has the lowest pay rate of any industrialized Western country. The actual pay in a country that is expensive to live in, like all of Europe, is extremely low. They have recently had a quasi minimum wage put in the last year or so, but you have to earn the minimum wage. So you have to work for virtually nothing until you're allowed to make minimum wage. This is the kind of silly nonsense that goes on in Germany and part of their rigged system. You can't come here with any kind of qualifications because of the fact that you have to be qualified by the Germans and they don't qualify anybody. You're not going to find any native speakers teaching their language to the Germans. They will not hire them because they are not accredited by the Germans, and the Germans won't accredit you. Plain and simple. So wages are super low. People are paid nothing. Nurses are like minimum wage employees. Wages are extremely low in every single sector that you can mention. Matter of fact, if you go into the food industry and worked for one of the big stores, supermarkets, after 3 years, you will net, after 3 years of training, and this is posted in a poster on the wall, you will net $1,300 a month. Barely enough money, and that's already being in a sub-management category after 3 years of training. Before that, you make like $800 a month, not enough to live on. So none of those industries are paid well, unlike the United States, who food stores pay you well. They have unions and other things. Well, you're never going to find any unions in Germany. That doesn't exist. So they pretty much pay you very poor money. And in general, the industries in Germany pay very low. Most of them haven't had raises in 20 years. There was a special done on TV by the British who interviewed people which haven't had raises since the wall came down, and they figured this was a way that they guaranteed security of their job. I mean, the boss put millions of dollars in his pocket, and they got nothing, thinking that they'll be employed because of this. This is the kind of mentality and low pay raise that you're going to get throughout Germany. Most of the industries don't make very good money. Even the unionized one who recently went on strike many years ago and got a 1% raise. I think that was the electrical or car union, I'm not sure. But it's rare to see that anyway because you don't get anything. You're not going to get a single thing. So all of the businesses are rigged, and they're rigged for those reasons. So you can't come in here. There are doctors that have come from other countries that are selling flowers on the street. The other problem, of course, is the horrendous, disgusting Arabic language, otherwise known as Deutsch, where everything is ran together, where there's all sorts of bizarre things. And of course, which is so prevalent, is their sexual hang-ups of having everything male, female, or in between. So this kind of ridiculous language, which most Germans don't even speak because it's too difficult to speak. They're kind of dead in the head and all of the problems that go with that. So they have very low wages. People start out at jobs for next to nothing. You're supposed to get, and here's the minimum wage, people, 800 euros, not enough to really mean anything of survival when your average little dumpy apartment is 600-700. There's no way you can possibly live on that. So, and of course, if you spend 3 years learning your trade in a supermarket, you make to a whole $1,300 after 300. Again, not enough money to survive on. Housing is all over Europe is in very short supply. Every country has brought in 4, 5, 6 million refugees, and they have taken up every available housing there is. There is none, and I don't see hardly anything being built anywhere. They need housing, and they have no intentions of meeting what they need because that will decrease the housing cost to the rich people. That's how it works. They did that in California and all over the U.S. and, of course, all over Europe. So there really is no minimum wage, and as soon as you qualify for the minimum wage, they fire you and bring someone else in. They're notorious for hiring people from countries that then they kick out, like the Polish. All of these things is how it works. And of course, the large percentage of Turks and Arabs in this country seem to work at their own jobs and are kind of separate from the economy except for what they get paid from the government, which seems to go on forever. And they have one child after another, having the highest birth rate. So this is something I saw in the United States as well, as the Mexicans came in with large families, and of course they all lived on government pay. So that seems to be how that goes. But you're not going to get high pay. None of the industries pay well. It's quite a joke, and they can't fill most of the jobs. There are 300,000 scientific-based jobs they can't fill. They can't fill train conductor jobs. Nobody wants to learn how to run trains, apparently, even though this is certainly something that is never going to go away. Train systems throughout Europe are pretty good and certainly would be a steady job, even though the price of going by train is outrageous, as it is with all transportation within Europe. It's a super high amount. To take a ride of a couple of hours on a train round trip will cost you about $100. That's a lot of money for what would be a 2-hour train ride, which is round trip. All fees, approximately to go what is 4 miles in a German town, cost you 4 euros, or approximately $5 one way. So if you want to go back and forth looking for jobs or going to jobs, you're going to spend $10 a day in transportation to go what is approximately 8 miles round trip. This is the kind of thing you run into. Why buses are so expensive, why trains are so expensive, is really unknown to me. But they limit your travel because they are so expensive. They almost force you to get a car, which is much cheaper to operate. Well, gasoline is a little expensive. It's a lot cheaper than going on trains and other things, even though there is a convenience factor of not hassling things. But certainly, they are not inexpensive in any way whatsoever. So you have very low wages. So if you're making, and in England, I believe it's £8 an hour as well. 8 to 10 pounds is what you're paid to live in a very expensive country. That doesn't cover any of your expenses, just as that 8 euros doesn't cover anything in Germany. So, and again, you can't have any skills to come in here with. They don't want anybody coming to Germany that they can hire. They'll use you as a slave. They'll put you in abandoned apartments and other things, like happened in an apartment I live next to, where they brought in a bunch of Polish guys and they slept there in the nighttime in sleeping bags on the floor. This is what they do, and this is a typical German way of doing things. And of course, they'll rape and rob anybody they can and pay their people nothing. So all these days of any belief system that you have in the German system taken care of is nonsense. It's all lies. It's all fraudulent. It's all bull. There is no good pay in Europe for anything. Now, professionals, as in everywhere in the world, make okay money. They don't tend to get rich like you get in America, but they have much easier lifestyles, doctors, etc. Now, they do work hard and are paid fairly well. But you don't get the same kind of disgusting wealth that the whore doctors in America tend to get. So all of that is part of it, but certainly the doctors, the lawyers, and the techs and the people in the high-tech industries make plenty of money. But they don't have enough people because nobody wants to learn those jobs. You got to remember, Germans are blue-collar workers. We want to fix car. Let's make some bread. We want to work at a brewery. So these are all the type of things that is very typical of the Germans. There is a certain class of people that go to universities and get those other jobs, but generally these are small industries which are over-exaggerated. In terms of the average German economy, of course, the Germans have lots of unemployment. Lots of the things they tell you are not true are true. They don't. They hide everything. They make sure they take people off of job lists anytime they do anything. They claim to retrain people, which they don't do. All these things are lies. And you're not going to come into a place and be able to get a job. You know, coming from Southern California, I used to go to a large medical building or legal building, and you could look at the actual directory there. And you would have every possible name in the world, from your typical British-type names of Smith and Jones to Pakistani to Indian to many Jewish, you name it, Hispanic names, you would see this. You go to your average place in Germany, even a big city, and you see nothing but German names. Everybody's kept out, and one of the big problems is the German language. Bringing in anybody and expecting them to learn the complicated Arabic language that German is and be able to function with it past a basic level is near impossible. People don't get it. It's too hard. Writing it is near impossible. So all of this becomes a giant problem for anybody that comes through. Now, Germans are trained for all of their schooling years. They learn English, but nobody knows it. They don't use it anywhere. Who are you going to talk English to when you don't even have English centers, English stores, or even English products, American products anywhere? And the military, the idiot American military, the boob incompetent cowards that they are, have all their stuff on their military bases surrounded by a fence that you can't even get into. Plain and simple as an American. So, while all these things should be outside the gates where the locals can come and use the facilities, buy American foods, get American products, and this could cater to Americans that live. But you have absolutely no rights to do anything in Germany as an American. Your Americans don't let you. They let the Germans buy on the base, they let the Germans have the jobs, and they let everything else. There are no jobs in Germany for Americans. Very few people have jobs, and for that matter, all around Europe, unless they're in some technical reality. But why would you do that? All the technical people that are British, French, and German all get jobs in America because they pay you double to triple what you can make in Europe, because all the wages are rock bottom, even if you're a professional. So this needs to be fully understood. And the good jobs, which are basically produced by foreigners like the Americans on military bases, are all given to the Germans. They even put Germans in American uniforms who join the American military that they have throughout their bases. If you're in Germany and you want a job, you're fat out of luck. They're all given to the Germans. I just recently went to the American Embassy to have a new passport made. Couldn't find one American working in the embassy. Not a single. I went every possible place I could. And of course, the incompetency of the embassy and the way it's run is you go for a passport and it takes you 5 hours of sitting in a chair waiting for it, even though you have an appointment. Oh, how American. So the whole idea is that their incompetency, and of course not a single employee at any booth whatsoever. And I went to all of them, stood next to them, drank coffee to listen to who they were. Not a single one of them was American. They had 10 guards out front, all carrying weapons. Not a single one was American. So the whole idea is that you can't get on military bases, you can't get a job there, and all of this is shown very clearly in Toy Town, America, Toy Town, Germany, I should say, where all the people complain about these things, that they can't get jobs there because the good work that pays well and gives you benefits doesn't come from a German. It comes from an American or a foreigner. I had one German guy. Oh, I love my country. Ah, googa googa. I drink bad beer and fart all the time. I'm a good German. Worked for a Finnish company and spoke English all day. So the point is that's very typical of what you'll find in terms of the good jobs are not German jobs unless you're part of their criminal activities. And in general, it doesn't pay well. There are no jobs in Germany doing anything of any note, and if they are good jobs, you've got to know somebody to get it. The German business is all rigged. They'll come up with, like the famous Aldi's food store, which bought Trader Joe's. They have one brother takes north and the other one takes south in terms of they divided the country there. And of course, then there is the two brothers, one that started Abados, otherwise known as Adidas in America. Well, they were brothers who didn't get along. So the other brothers started Puma. And so this is how everything goes. It's all a big fix. So they broke it up within the same 1,500 families of how they do it. But there is no work here. They won't let you into the system. They're not going to hire you unless there's a super gap. And that gap will generally be in some technological area, which they cannot fill because the Germans don't know anything scientifically. They copy. That's what they do. So this is a serious problem that continues to go on. So they bring in Indians and other people. I frankly doubt, I don't see why any American who's a professional who can make lots of money in the U.S. and get all the juicy benefits. You got to remember, places like the aircraft industry, Google, and other things, you don't work hard and you make a fortune. As a matter of fact, that's where all the Germans go. And this was even proven in all sorts of industries. I saw this happen in the 70s. It even happened where my father works, where they brought in a German guy who basically was a drunk and just was drunk all day and played the stock market and made more money than my father, who was a dumb, ignorant slob. So this is the type of thing. You're not going to do that in a German business, but they hired this boob to come in and do that. And this happens all the time. Now, you would never be an American and go from Google and go work for a German company. What insanity would do that? So you can be in their goofball land of mediocre food, gay women. I mean, what are you talking about? They have absolutely nothing to offer. Certainly, there's no great benefits. You got to remember, if you work for the big guys, and I had many friends that worked for Boeing and the top industries, they were making $70,000, $80,000 a year. They were paid overtime, even though they made $80,000 a year. If they had to work harder, they paid them more. They had AAA medical policies. They had huge retirement. This is what you get with American companies that are successful. Of course, you don't get this as a poor slob on the street, getting your average jobs at Walmart and other places. You're just nothing but a piece of garbage. But that is not the case in American corporations. You do not get those kind of benefits. Now, hundreds of thousands of Germans are leaving all the time from Germany to get much better opportunities elsewhere, these cushy jobs. And of course, the fact that Germany is a low-level country that is overcrowded with millions of immigrants that are culturally different. They have taken over all the cities. We just announced that Frankfurt now has more immigrants in it than anything else. They are the majority. I was there recently, and you don't see anybody there. It's like London. London is no longer British. It's all the immigrants. Whatever that means, I don't have particular love for anybody, but I think that if I go to London, I should see Brits. Well, if I go to Frankfurt, I think I should see Germans. So when I go to Pakistan, I see Pakistanis. So I don't quite understand that, but you won't see that in everywhere else. So I don't believe there's any good people, period. And I certainly have no use for Germans, Brits, or anybody else, or Americans. So the Americans won't give other Americans jobs. You come here and you won't get a job. It's interesting on the military bases or on their websites, and they talk about, you want a job? Well, here's what the military tells you. Start your own business. Start your own business in Germany? Sell to Germans when you don't know German? And what businesses? You just don't start businesses in Germany. What are you going to sell to Germans? All the stuff that they've already copied from America, or all the stuff on the American base that they get to anyway because they get on base where I can't personally get on base? This is the kind of insanity. You would think that there would be lots of these jobs. They even hire security guards to watch out for the military. I found that interesting, but had contact with them because of my security background. They don't have any Americans working there other than a couple of old codgers that puke on themselves. The point is, all the jobs go to other people, and that's what they do. There's no jobs for Americans on military bases. They're contracts given to Germans, and they hire Germans. Many Germans will go and just sleep all day because the contracts are guaranteed. So this is the kind of things that go on, and they get paid huge salaries with huge benefits that you can't get in regular German industry. All coming from the Americans. And as I've stated, well, you want a job? Well, go to the American embassy, right? You have a problem? You want to talk to somebody? Hello? Can I help you? This is Brumhilda. How can I help you? This is who you get on the phone when you want assistance from supposedly a friendly American face. Well, there ain't none. You're a sucker, baby. You won't get a job from your own people. Now let's spin this difference. Woo, 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 woo. Let's go to the German embassy in Los Angeles. So the whole idea is the German embassy in Los Angeles doesn't have an American working there. They're all Germans. Not a single American there, not even emptying the trash buckets. Let's go over to the Luftwaffe. Ooh, they train, you know, in the little state of Texas. So, many people have stated online the fact that they had some contact with the Luftwaffe, who trains, of course, they train under Americans who will teach them how to do things properly. Certainly, they can't figure that out themselves. So the whole idea is that there's not a single American employee on the Luftwaffe base or area that they train. Not a single one. And rightfully so. If you have Germans living in Texas, they should have jobs from you, that you help out your other people. Of course, in America, you don't do that. You give all your jobs to foreigners, and you let your Americans sit on the curb, or in the curb, and then spit on them as you go by while you pick up the German who is waiting there. That's an American for you, the lowest scum you can possibly find. So this is the kind of problems you run into. So wages throughout Europe are all very low. Italy has low wages, so does Greece. England, as I said, has very high expenses and very low wages as well. Everybody there has to go to college to get any kind of job. They're, just like America, highly in debt. The wages are very low. It's hard to make money. I knew a girl there that worked for the city, and she made peanuts, could barely live, and she was a city employee making some pretty serious decisions about a city. Yet she was paid nothing, had to live in what we call a mobile home. She couldn't afford an apartment. So you figure that out. So this is very typical of what happens in Britain as well. And of course, this creates a whole criminal class of people because you do whatever it takes even to make extra money so that you can survive. And of course, that's the reason for all these crappy wages. It enslaves the populace by the fact that you have to make extra money, which you can't make from a real job. Very, very important. So, that's the story. What is the good things about certain policies, which psychotic America doesn't seem to want to do, like take care of their people medically? The only country on the planet that doesn't do that, particularly industrialized Western country, because that's a giant mafia of criminals who just bleed you literally to death. They kill you for profit. They torture you for profit, and doctors live in giant mansions like they're almost godlike in the money they have. And while nurses are paid garbage. So these are all the things that we just don't quite understand what is going on with all this. So this is the kind of thing that happens. So the one thing about Europe, which is not centric to any particular country, all the countries in Europe provide people for medical at one level or another. Now, per country, considering the EU is so dominant, yeah, you pay us, we come there, you pay us, yeah, give us your money. Well, they don't. And while they want industries to meet German standards, they don't have medicine that meets German standards. So, while medical care in Germany is pretty good, and they supposedly have more hospitals than any other country, which is one of the reasons they tend to have less problems, but they're lying about corona. They lie about everything. You can't believe anything coming from this little Nazi world. They tell you whatever they want. It's all contrived nonsense. It's all based on criminal activities. So, the point is that the medical policies from Britain to Italy to France and everything else are quite different. So it depends on the country of what kind of services you get. Now, they do also have a rational unemployment policy, which is the fact that you're on unemployment, which also pays your medical, and they pay your apartment until you find a job. Well, of course, that's logical sense because of the fact that if you're unemployed, you're unemployed. What are you supposed to do? There may be no opportunities in your area, and they don't want you to move because the bottom line is then you become a statistic somewhere else. So you have to stay where you are and are trapped there, and if it's a non-employment area, well, you never get employment. People don't get hired, particularly in Europe and Germany, if you're over 40. Forget it. You're over with. There's huge amounts of youth out there that can take any kind of non-technical job. And to a certain extent, rightly so. If you're going to have people home on unemployment, shouldn't it be older people instead of the young kids? So this is all part of the process that we need to understand and need to know about Europe. So that's one of the better things. Can you imagine in the United States, which claims to be so rich and is, you just have to look at people and what they own in the United States, which is obscene, the people who are rich. If they paid for your medical while you were unemployed, if they paid for your apartment, as well as giving you monthly money. Can you imagine what that would do for the U.S. economy? Now, they do this in all of Europe. All of Europe has, every country has national health insurance of one type and another, some better than others. They all have unlimited unemployment. And of course, you just can't sit there. You do have to show you're trying to get a job. And there are classes, particularly Britain, forces people to go to classes all the time to retrain themselves to find a job. Probably, and this has become a problem with some people, because there doesn't matter what you train in, there's no jobs in the UK. There's nothing to get jobs for. And they're not going to train you to be a physicist in some goofy little college that is ran by the state. So all this stuff is kind of a joke, but this is the things they do when you're on unemployment and so forth. So these are all the things that are the more positive things about Europe, and there is that availability to medical care that you don't get in the United States. And of course, that means that the people are healthier. How the United States can think that people can get jobs and live right when their teeth are rotting out, they can't see, and they don't have proper medical care is beyond comprehension. It's such an evil that it's hard to even talk about. But the point is that we all need to understand the fact of that the system itself in Europe is in serious trouble, and there are no prosperous EU countries. The UK is doing kind of okay. They have an awful lot of problems. Certainly Italy, which is trillions of dollars in debt. Greece is history. You have all these problems in Europe. France is in terrible trouble with unrest in the streets because there's no decent jobs or anything else. Their jobs have all been taken by the Germans. The Germans are not doing well. There's lots of unemployment. There's rock bottom wages, and of course high costs, and no building going on to build the very needed housing in any of Europe. Very little is being built, and as with most places, there are of course always the availability of very expensive housing and apartments, which nobody can afford. So this is a very typical thing. This is happening in China as well. They've built entire cities that are empty because nobody can afford to live there. So this is a quite shocking revelation. But there doesn't seem to be any type of building going on. They keep pushing people into cities, which are located by the millions and millions in all of Europe, and this is where everybody lives when there is plenty and plenty of space. But, you know, the European attitude is think small, and they certainly do that. But these horrible problems of Americans not being able to get jobs that they are due. You pay for that military. You should be able to go on that base. You're paying for that embassy that you can't get a job in because there's nothing but Germans there. This is evil and absurd. And of course, Americans think it's wonderful. Oh, the Germans love me. I want to be loved. I'm an American. We're here to help you. I just don't want to help any of my own people. I mean, this kind of evil sickness that is infested the American consciousness is beyond understanding. No one else does this. No one has embassies that hire foreigners exclusively and have absolutely none of their own people in it. No military bases hire people from that country alone and have no of their own people there. They hire as much as they can of their own people, as people have done with everything. People hire people in restaurants and other places. If you run a Spanish restaurant, you hire Spanish people. If you run an Israeli restaurant, you hire Israelis. Everybody does this. Arnold Schwarzenegger in his restaurant, when it was running, had lots of Austrians he hired, including the chef, and he sold his restaurant to another Austrian.
Yeah, Mr. I love America. I love California.
Complete nonsense. This kind of nonsense will never stop because that's what Americans are. They're two-faced, rotten people that never seem to help each other and are more than happy to even help the enemy under their own people. It's just shocking.